Thank you at home as well for joining us this hour. It is July 4th Eve. It is July 3rd, and you would usually expect this to be like a sleepy news day. But what have we learned about the eve of things in this Trump administration? What have we learned about, for example, like your typical Friday night in the Trump administration? Well, holiday eve works the same way. Turns out this is another one of those days when we have had to take the show that we were planning and ball it up and put it in the circular file, which is actually a file that we just save for other days because these things do keep coming around. But breaking news has once again blown up our show planning with something just sort of incredible that just happened in federal court today with no warning. Out of the blue, it just blew up something that everybody thought was quite settled. And it is coming from this remarkable and dramatic soap opera of a thing that has to do with this administration and with something that the president feels more strongly about than anything else in his presidency. You might have seen a few days ago that Chuck Todd from Meet the Press, he had an interview with President Trump right before the Democratic debates last week. And there's a bunch of news in that interview. There's always news when somebody outside the conservative media sphere gets to actually ask the president questions that involve follow-ups and not just him, like, screaming over helicopter noise and all that stuff. We knew there was going to be news in that interview. And in fact, one of the things that made news was that Chuck Todd asked President Trump what his biggest mistake was. What was his biggest regret from his presidency thus far? And the president's answer to Chuck Todd was that his biggest mistake, the one thing he's done wrong as president, is Jeff Sessions. You think about everything that has happened and gone wrong over the past 2.5 years. Really, the biggest problem is Jeff Sessions? As far as the president is concerned, that is his one mistake, the only thing he regrets. Now, we know from huge big chunks of the Robert Mueller report that the president's anger toward Jeff Sessions, his feelings about Jeff Sessions, are not lightly arrived at. This is not a personal thing or a passing fancy. We know from Mueller's report that Trump expressed vehement resentment and anger toward Sessions over a long period of time, and he ultimately fired Sessions for a very specific reason. Because the president believed that as Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions should have done much more to use the Justice Department and to use the U.S. legal system to serve Donald Trump, to serve the wishes and to serve the personal interests of Trump. Trump was mad at Jeff Sessions for not locking up Hillary Clinton. He was mad at Jeff Sessions for not firing the special counsel. He was mad at Jeff Sessions for not shutting down the investigation into Russia attacking our elections. The president thought the Justice Department should just be ordered to do those things for him because he wanted those things. And Jeff Sessions didn't give him those things. I mean, Jeff Sessions, to a certain extent, thwarted the president's expressed desires in terms of what he wanted from the Justice Department. And so he now believes Jeff Sessions was his biggest mistake. Well, part of the reason Robert Mueller's report had so many direct quotes and so much color about the interactions between Trump and Sessions and what Trump was demanding of Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, part of the reason Mueller had so much detail on that was because Jeff Sessions' chief of staff, a man by the name of Jody Hunt, he gave testimony to Mueller's inquiry. And Jody Hunt, for the entire duration of Jeff Sessions' time as Attorney General, he basically had a front row seat to this bizarre dynamic between the president and his Attorney General, to all the wild demands that Trump was making of the Attorney General. Jody Hunt was there to see and hear and witness all of the crazy bleep that Trump demanded from his Attorney General and expected from his Justice Department. Jody Hunt's chief of staff was chief of staff to Sessions. So he was there for all of it. He saw it all happen when Trump made those demands, when Trump implored and berated Sessions for not agreeing to those demands. I mean, Jody Hunt was there, front row seat, when Trump ultimately fired Sessions for the crime of not doing what the president wanted. Well, now Jeff Sessions, of course, is gone as Attorney General. Incidentally, Trump says he's much happier with his new guy. He's getting much more of what he wants from his new guy. But even after Jeff Sessions was fired as Attorney General, Jody Hunt stayed on at the Justice Department. And in fact, he has had a big promotion at the Justice Department. Jody Hunt is now Assistant Attorney General of the United States. And in that role, he runs the whole civil division of the Justice Department, which is a huge part of it's like the big part of the Justice Department. And in that job, Jody Hunt today showed what he has learned over these past couple of years from that front row seat he had to the whole Jeff Sessions dynamic. He showed what he has learned over the past couple of years about how President Trump expects the Justice Department to do what he wants and to do what serves his interest, no matter what, no matter how crazy it is, no matter how contrary it might be to the normal processes of the Justice Department and a basic understanding of the rule of law. I mean, Jody Hunt, maybe more than anybody still in government, has seen up close how even the highest ranking person, the most powerful person at the Justice Department, can be not just fired, but attacked and demeaned and publicly pilloried and blamed if that official has the temerity to not employ the Justice Department to give the president things that he wants. And he saw that happen to his boss, Jeff Sessions. And now Jeff Sessions is gone, but Jody Hunt is still there, and he's now a senior Justice Department official himself. And today, Mr. Hunt showed, I think, again, what he learned in what was just a remarkable turn of events in a federal court today on July 4th Eve in a hastily called court conference in which the judge summoned both sides on very short notice to try to figure out what the heck was going on, because what had been maintained to the court was apparently not happening in the real world, and federal judges tend not to like that. What this is about is the Supreme Court case that the Trump administration lost last week. You might remember late last week, the Supreme Court turned back the Trump administration's efforts to tack something new onto the census, to change the census in a way that was expected to result in an undercount of Latinos and an overcount of white people and Republicans specifically. They have been trying to change the census that way for the past couple of years. And multiple federal judges in 3 different jurisdictions have ruled against the Trump administration. They've ruled that the Trump administration basically had made up their proposed reasons for changing the census in that way, and so it wasn't proper for them to change the census. Last week, it went to the Supreme Court, and in a 5-4 ruling, the Supreme Court told the Trump administration basically that the lower courts were right, and that their purported reasons for why they said they wanted to change the census, those reasons plainly weren't true. And so the Supreme Court told the Trump administration late last week that they couldn't go ahead with it, at least not under the terms they had been trying to go ahead with it under. So this time last night here on the show, we reported that the Justice Department had conceded basically that they'd lost that case, that it's over. They had told the court already over the course of the litigation on this issue that they were up against a hard deadline, that they needed to start actually printing the census by July 1st, which was Monday of this week. And so even though they might have tried to, they might have wanted to go back to the court again and come up with some new justification for adding this question in some other way, frankly, they're out of time, right? And so they notified the court that they were giving up on trying to do this for the 2020 census. They were starting to print the census already without tacking on that extra question. And they didn't just say it in a press release. The reason we were able to report it last night on the show is because they formally put it in writing to the court. Quote, "Counsel, we can confirm that the decision has been made to print the 2020 decennial questionnaire without a citizenship question, and that the printer has been instructed to begin the printing process. Signed, specific trial attorney at the U.S. Department of Justice, Civil Division." Civil Division at the Justice Department, again, is now run by Jody Hunt, by Jeff Sessions' former chief of staff. And so as of last night, this is how the Justice Department, this is how the Civil Division of the Justice Department had left it. They're telling the court, okay, we're out, it's over. But then today, on Twitter, President Trump expressed his displeasure with this eventuality. He insisted on Twitter that no, this is not what his Justice Department is doing. This is not what his government is doing. You heard that we're not putting on that census question? We certainly are. And Jody Hunt, who has seen this movie before, Jody Hunt, who has been fried by this particular proverbial electric fence in his recent past, he rears up and basically panics today in public on a hastily called court hearing on the phone with a federal judge. And we have the transcript of it. And I have never seen or heard anything like this before. But, I mean, presumably, in the mind of the head of the Civil Division at the Justice Department, presumably, you know, he was reliving President Trump beating the ghost of Jeff Sessions all over again for Sessions refusing to do what he wanted the Justice Department to do. And this is how it all came out at this hearing today. Just remarkable. So the judge starts off and says, "Good afternoon." He asks the attorneys for the plaintiffs to introduce themselves. They do so. Then he says, "For the government." And the lawyer for the Justice Department says, "For the government, Your Honor, Josh Gardner and Jody Hunt, Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Division." And the judge says, "Mr. Gardner, I know you're on vacation, so I hated to interrupt that." So that's the way they start. Right away, it's a sign that something is unusual here, right? Josh Gardner is the Justice Department lawyer, career lawyer, who's been handling this case for the Justice Department, defending what the Trump administration was trying to do with the census. He just lost that case at the Supreme Court last week. I mean, the Justice Department has conceded as of last night that it's over, that the Trump administration won't be adding this new question to the census. They've notified the court of that fact. That it's done, right? The guy who's been handling this case for the Justice Department lost the case and has told the court they're conceded that it's done. And so now that it's done, that dude has gone on vacation. So why is he back in this hearing today, phoning into this emergency hearing? Well, he has to call in from vacation because apparently this isn't done. And if you want to know why he has to call in from vacation because this isn't done, it's because of the other guy from the Justice Department who has also phoned in with him. The big boss, the head of the Civil Division, the guy who was recently Jeff Sessions' chief of staff, and who has therefore seen what happens to senior Justice Department officials in the Trump administration when they don't give Trump what he wants, no matter what it is. And so you've got the trial attorney phoning in from vacation, and you've got the head of the Civil Division phoning into this hearing himself. Because that guy knows what you're supposed to do, right? Because the president has yelled jump. And that guy, of all people, knows that the answer when the president says jump is, "How high, sir? How high?" So the judge starts things off, quote, "I guess the reason I wanted to have this call, obviously we had our call, I guess it was yesterday, feels like a while ago, but I think it was yesterday. And then this morning I saw a tweet that got my attention. I don't know how many federal judges have Twitter accounts, but I happen to be one of them, and I follow the president. And so I saw a tweet that directly contradicted the position that Mr. Gardner had shared with me yesterday. I think I even indicated yesterday, and I'll indicate again today, that Mr. Gardner and every government attorney who has appeared in this case has been nothing but professional and candid with the court. But then the tweet that I saw, which I suspect we all know the tweet I'm referring to, then caused me to think I hadn't gone far enough in terms of pinning the government down on where things stand. So now we have a court reporter here. I'm going to ask, frankly, the same question I asked yesterday to Mr. Gardner. Is the government going to continue efforts to place a citizenship question on the 2020 census?" Josh Gardner: "Your Honor, this is Mr. Gardner. I want to back up just a step and say I've been with the United States Department of Justice for 16 years through multiple administrations, and I have always endeavored to be as candid as possible with the court. What I told the court yesterday was absolutely my best understanding of the state of affairs. The president's position on this issue, just like the plaintiffs and my best understanding of the state of affairs. I do not have a deeper understanding of what that means at this juncture other than what the president has tweeted. But obviously, as you can imagine, I am doing my absolute best to figure out what's going on. I can tell you that I have confirmed that the Census Bureau is continuing with the process of printing the questionnaire without a citizenship question, and that process has not stopped." The judge says, "All right, well, I'll hear from plaintiff's counsel." And the lawyer for the plaintiff speaks. "Your Honor, I think this underscores, obviously, the need for a stipulated order, as we talked about yesterday, that makes clear not only that the government is printing the questionnaire for the 2020 census without a citizenship question, but that there will be no further effort to inquire about citizenship status as part of the 2020 census in any manner. I think it also suggests that we may need a further provision of that order that makes clear that the defendants won't communicate to the public anything to the contrary, suggesting that the 2020 census is inquiring about citizenship status. And further, that they will publicly counter any such misinformation that comes from government officials." The misinformation from government officials here, as described by the plaintiff's lawyer, would be misinformation from the president. The president's saying, we're putting that on the census, even though they're not, and they've maintained to the court that they're not. So at this point, they have sort of a long back and forth discussion between the plaintiff's lawyers and the judge about whether the judge actually can block the president from publicly saying untrue things about what the government is doing on an issue like this. At one point, the judge says, quote, "I assume the parties aren't suggesting I can enjoin the President of the United States from tweeting things?" Well, Your Honor, don't assume anything at this point. But there remains this basic question here, which is that the Trump administration tried to do a thing. They lost in court. As of yesterday, they conceded that they would therefore no longer try to do that thing. But then the president went online today and said, yeah, I'm still going to do that thing. So what's the remedy for that? What's going to happen here? Well, cue the poor guy who was supposed to be on vacation as of today, who has spent 16 years at the Justice Department and who was perhaps under the impression that this was still a normal government and that's how he should behave. He says, this is Josh Gardner, quote, "Your Honor, to back up, this is a very fluid situation, which we are trying to get our arms around. And obviously, once we get more information, we will communicate that immediately to the court and the parties. I do want to address a preliminary issue, though, and that is that the current status quo is that plaintiffs are fully protected, meaning the new question isn't going to be tacked onto the census, as far as he knows, regardless of what the president said on Twitter today. Quote, "I recognize this is a fluid situation, and perhaps that might change, but we're just not there yet, and I can't possibly predict at this juncture what exactly is going to happen. But as of now, the basis for the citizenship question is firmly enjoined, vacated, and does not exist. I think the current fluidity of the state of play suggests the status quo is we need to see how these things develop. And at that juncture, Your Honor, if you have additional questions, I can turn it over to the Assistant Attorney General, Mr. Hunt." So now we get to find out why Jody Hunt is there, why the boss is there, why Jeff Sessions' old chief of staff has also inserted himself into this case. Mr. Hunt, Your Honor, this is Joseph Hunt, Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Division. We at the Department of Justice have been instructed to examine whether there is a path forward consistent with the Supreme Court's decision that would allow us to include the citizenship question on the census. We think there may be a legally available path under the Supreme Court's decision. We're examining that, looking at near-term options to see whether that is viable and possible. Viable and possible, both kinds. We have been instructed to, presumably from the president's Twitter feed, we have been instructed to not do what we told the court we were going to do yesterday. And we have no idea what that means we should do. But here I am telling you what Donald Trump's Twitter feed told me to do, regardless of what it means, and regardless of what it means for the Justice Department, regardless of what it means for the lawyers, including the career lawyers whose reputations in federal court depend in part on whether or not the court can believe them when they say things. And here's how the judge decides to end this. It's just brutal. The judge says, okay, here's where we are. And then if either side has a different view, I'll hear that. But here's where we are. By Friday at 2 p.m., I want one of two things. I either want a stipulation, as we've been discussing, indicating that the citizenship question will not appear on the census, or I want a proposed scheduling order for how we're going to go forward on the equal protection claim that's been remanded to this court. I want one of those two things by Friday at 2 o'clock. Any questions as to that? Josh Gardner. Your Honor, this is Mr. Gardner. The one thing I would request is, given that tomorrow is the 4th of July and the difficulty in assembling people from all over the place, is it possible that we could do this on Monday? The judge, no. Mr. Gardner, and again, oh, okay. The judge, no. Because timing is an issue. Timing is an issue, and we've lost a week at this point. And this isn't anything against anybody on this call. I've been told different things, and it's becoming increasingly frustrating. If you were Facebook and an attorney for Facebook told me one thing, and then I read a press release from Mark Zuckerberg telling me something else, I would be demanding that Mark Zuckerberg appear in court with you the next time, because I would be saying, I don't think you speak for your client anymore. I think I'm being really reasonable. Excuse me. I think I'm actually being really reasonable here. And just saying, I need a final answer by Friday at 2 p.m. or we're going forward. That is where we are. Oh, that is where we are. Does the Justice Department speak for the U.S. government? Who's the client? Does your client know that you speak for the U.S. government, or do you not? I mean, this is a bunch of things, all of which are astonishing, right? I mean, this is, at base level, this is the Trump administration trying to change the census to systematically undercount Latinos and Democrats. A. It's them being blocked from doing that by the courts. It's the Justice Department conceding that they've been blocked from doing that. And then it's the president himself telling the Justice Department to do it anyway because he says so. And it's the Trump appointee who runs that part of the Justice Department who is literally himself personally an important fact witness to the president's potentially criminal obstruction of justice and threatening the last attorney general and ordering the last attorney general to do things he could not do. It's that fact witness, that guy who's now in power himself at the Justice Department, who's jumping into this case right now saying, yes, sir, I'm here for you, sir. I will jump into that case with both feet. I will tell the court to forget everything the Justice Department has previously said and done and averred to the court as recently as last night, because instead of everything that has gone before us in this case, now the president has tweeted and like, I know what happens if I don't obey the tweet. I've seen it happen. So forget everything. The president's tweeted. That's what we're going with. I mean, a policy dispute is not a constitutional crisis. A bad actor holding public office is not a constitutional crisis. A constitutional crisis would be like, for example, a president choosing to defy a lawful court order. And that is what we are edging at here. All this obstruction of justice stuff about the Mueller report and how the president was pressuring the Justice Department and ordering them to do things to serve his own interests, and the Justice Department was moderately resisting to the extent that they could. All of that stuff laid out in the Mueller report as potential obstruction of justice by the president wasn't only laid out so we could decide whether or not the president maybe committed those crimes. It was also laid out so that we could see the type of constitutional pressure the president was using to try to pull apart these threads that make us the country that we are. The president defies a lawful court order or instructs his Justice Department to do so. That's no longer a normal dispute. That's constitutional crisis territory. That's where he's pointing. Can you count on people at the Justice Department being the right people and the upstanding people to stop it from happening? I mean, can't say you didn't see this coming, right? More ahead. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.